All right, why don't we get started? I know Linda's on her way, so we can get through some of this. Call the meeting to order, a regularly scheduled meeting, and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first order of business is the approval of the minutes from our two previous meetings. I want to thank Karen for stepping in. Is Karen, did she get this job full-time now? That's a real honor, honestly. Yeah, okay. And thank you. I went through them, didn't have anything material. If anyone have any comments on the minutes, go ahead.
No, nothing.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. That's allowed too. Karen, I would say we have, as a board, adopted sort of brevity of the minutes, not feeling it necessary to repeat everything that was said. I think these were comprehensive and good, but mostly try to concentrate on the actions that were taken, the topics that were covered. But these were good. Thank you very much. Hearing no material changes, move for adoption of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, Finance Director and Treasurer recruitment process.
So to introduce this topic will be our new town manager, Maria Capriola. So I'll just turn it over to her. That's all right.
Welcome, Maria.
Thank you. Where would your preference be?
We always need to be on the mic because we are being recorded and on television.
Great. Good evening, and thank you for having me this evening. I've been speaking with Sean about the importance of initiating a recruitment to find his replacement for Finance Director Treasurer, and wanted an opportunity to come before you all and present a draft job posting as well as a draft recruitment plan. I know here in Simsbury the charter is a little different than what I was used to in Mansfield. Previously I had full appointing authority for department heads, but that is a little different here, and it does require that I would bring a recommendation essentially to you all for approval, and then ultimately the Board of Selectmen is the final appointing authority for this position. So given that, I felt that it was very important to do an inclusive recruitment process. I have modeled it off of some recruitment processes I've used in the past for hiring members of the leadership team. This is an area of expertise that I do have. I was directly responsible for running municipal recruitments in Mansfield, and previously when I was in Newburyport doing that as well. So I have had a lot of experience looking for department heads and filling key slots on our leadership team. So given that we do not have funds budgeted for an executive search firm, I would recommend that we go ahead and manage the recruitment out of my office, with myself providing oversight and Eric Gomes in our office, who also has a lot of experience in this area, sort of doing the day-to-day and nuts and bolts of the recruitment for us. And perhaps before we talk about an anticipated need for an interim director, we could walk through the draft job ad. These were some qualifications and experience that I was envisioning would be important to the position. I did also look back at previous postings that we've done here in Simsbury in recent years when we had been looking for a finance director. And so I covered, key areas that I thought that it's important to highlight that this person is responsible for in terms of the financial affairs for the entire town, that they would be directly responsible for key functions such as accounting, payroll, purchasing, budgeting, grants administration, serving as treasurer and overseeing cash management, assisting with the management of employee benefits. That's our health insurance fund and our pension fund. This person also oversees the revenue division and the tax collection division as well. And then also the key piece too for supervision. This person does supervise a number of employees, and that we would be looking for somebody who has experience in a supervisory capacity. What previously had been posted here was a minimum of 8 years of experience, and previously we had posted in accounting, finance, or related field. I thought it was important to add auditing. There's quite a shortage of good municipal finance people in Connecticut right now. And in talking with some of my colleagues, when folks have not been able to find people with municipal experience, where they have had some success is finding auditors who audited municipal accounts previously. So that's an area that I think would be very relevant, and we may be able to, get some very qualified people who have that background. So 8 years of experience in the field, 4 of supervisory experience, and then qualifications I thought would be desirable would be if in fact somebody has actually worked for a municipality, possession of a CPA, and if somebody had a master's degree, that would, I think, be icing on the cake for the ideal package. Typically what I would do is I would ask people, in addition to our online employment application, to submit a resume. To also submit a letter of interest so we can get a sense of who they are and get a little peek into what their writing skills are, and to ask at least up front for at least 3 professional references. So those were, again, my draft thoughts on qualities and qualifications that we would be looking for in a candidate, but wanted, again, to reach out to you all to see if there are other qualifications or experiences that you felt were really important for us to be focusing on or highlighting in the posting.
Okay, I'll start. What would the estimate be for the cost of a consultant if we had that in our budget?
Sure. Executive search firms, depending on the type of recruitment that we would be running, for example, to run a town manager recruitment, usually a search firm runs between about $20,000 and $30,000. And I would think it probably close to the 20 number, 15 to 20.
Ballpark.
Okay. And there was nothing in the budget for these jobs or anywhere? There never is? Is there ever? I can't remember. I should know, of
I don't
course.
think so. I think typically.
The first time it was
it's been
budgeted really
handled.
was the town manager recruitment. That one we knew in advance to budget that this past year.
Rob, there was a contingency, as you recall, but
Right.
that has been used by Deepwater Wind for the most part, I believe. You guys can
Yeah.
verify that.
Well, other than the $2.5 million set aside contingency.
Well-
Right.
That's right, technically.
No,
So
yeah,
technically,
yeah,
there
no,
is
no,
some,
Right,
but
sure, spend it all. But that's true, there's no budget line item that we would have for that.
But
Are
are there sort of standard go-to places that people looking for these jobs tend to go to?
There are, and I did highlight that in the recruitment plan. Typically for a position like this, we would post with Connecticut GFOA. There's also a New England States GFOA group that we would typically post with. We could discuss whether or not there's some value in posting with National GFOA. And sort of a neat small world coincidence, but one of my mentors is now actually the executive director of National GFOA. And so I could always reach out to Chris and ask if, he knows of really, some really talented folks who might be looking in this region. So, part of it too is reaching out to our contacts and our network of folks such as Chris, who's the executive director of GFOA, or reaching out to our colleagues at the MPA program in the Department of Public Policy. Sometimes we've also had success, working through those channels and then circulating the post. So some professional associations, I think probably CCM would be helpful as well. So those would be some of the typical places that we would post for this. Again, some Connecticut-specific sites, but also to expand the search because we know there's a shortage of good people in Connecticut, to include New England States or possibly a national posting as well.
Okay, and was there any considered, are there internal candidates that would be considered in this process also if they apply, or is that?
Certainly be able to apply, sure, but none have expressed interest, at least to me, but we don't know of any identified.
Correct.
And was any consideration given to possibly combining other functions in this job, given the opportunity that presents itself?
Sure. So I think with the time frame that we have to make that happen, even within a year would be really difficult if we wanted to look at shared services. It's something I'm very interested in. Some of you may know, but I actually came from a shared services model in Mansfield. We were one of the first and had shared financial management services with our Board of Ed since the 1980s. And I was also directly responsible for managing shared services for employee benefits and risk management with our schools. We shared facilities and IT. It was a wonderful model. And very much in support of that. But typically, if we were to move in the direction of consolidation, that would take 6 months, a year at least of planning and getting us there. But one thought I have had is, again, if we were fortunate enough to find a candidate who had shared services experience, or perhaps had maybe worked for a Board of Ed, but also had worked for a municipality, that again, I think that since a number of our policy bodies have expressed an interest in researching shared services, that if we could pick up a candidate who has experience doing that, again, that would, I think, be a bonus for us in the event that we decided we wanted to move in that direction in the future.
Other questions or comments?
I have a couple questions. In the interest of timing, both because if possible, would like to avoid having to use some interim person, and it's a lot to learn, and then you're only gonna use it for 2 months. Be a smoother transition if we can go directly to the next person. And I just think we ought to be a little more nimble than having this, 6-month process of trying to replace someone. So is there a way for us to consider eliminating a step or two, such as having to have it come back to us and the Board of Selectmen for an actual vote? I mean, speaking for only myself, I know Rob's going to be involved, and I think Lisa. If they're involved in the interview process and it's a consensus process with you and whoever is representing the Board of Selectmen, I don't feel like it needs to come back to me for a vote.
By charter, it has to.
By charter, does it have
The charter
to?
does have the requirement, so that does.
That's something for us to put on the next charter review, because to be this unnimble.
Well, it doesn't look
That's
like
a
it's
word.
that unnimble. Your timeline is pretty condensed.
I did try my best, knowing
6
that we
weeks.
had some of those charter requirements and that there was process associated with
Yeah.
that time.
It's just if you
To work
happen-
with an aggressive timeline as best as I could with those requirements.
I'm just thinking, if you happen to find the right person, you gotta wait a month to get a vote
Well, let's
done.
put it this way. I don't think we'll let our Board of Finance regularly scheduled
Good.
meetings get in the way
Good.
of getting the right candidate,
Right,
an offer and on board.
Okay.
All right. You have that commitment from me.
good.
Yeah, so we can have a special meeting if we have to.
What kind of comfort do you have in, collecting these applications in a 3-week time frame, given we're not going out with a recruitment, recruiting,
Sure.
recruiter?
Sure, I generally find for professional level positions that 3 to 4 weeks is usually sufficient time to collect a good batch of applications.
Okay.
And we'll use our online employment application system, NeoGov, to help with that, which also helps with screening the qualifications and making sure that we're getting all the required application materials. So that particular software system really does help to streamline that process for us.
And my other question was something I emailed you about, is this a requirement for a physical exam before? I'm just hoping that you'll look at that not only for this position, but in general for office-based positions. I'm assuming that we pay for those physical exams, and I can't imagine that there's anything that would come up out of a medical exam that we would ever act on to say, oh, we're not going to hire you after all because you have such and such an illness. I mean, that's like a lawsuit waiting to happen. So I don't see much value to it. It's not like, Sean, have you been doing any heavy lifting?
Well-
In a literal sense?
I mean, these nameplates alone, it's pretty sharp.
So I just take that under advisement, and if there's a way to get rid of that in many processes, it'll save us money, it'll save you time, and it's not a common practice in other employers.
Right, and thank you, that's a great point. So what Linda had asked earlier was the pre-employment screening. Is that something that we would be concerned about running afoul of ADA? And essentially, we do have the ability to make a job offer conditional based upon a pre-employment examination, medical examination, but as long as the examination is based on the essential functions of the position. So all of our job descriptions do have what's called essential functions, and they would typically highlight physical requirements of the position. And so as long as we were making sure that the results of the medical evaluation were saying that the person was capable of doing the essential functions, that we would be okay. And to your point, that's well taken. It's definitely something I'll be looking into. We had, when I first got to Mansfield, we used to do pre-employment examinations for all positions, but then we really found that for more office-based positions that it wasn't as critical, and we switched to positions that tended to be more safety sensitive in function, or where the physical requirements and essential functions were different, where it really warranted a true occupational examination.
I would emphasize the other side of that, though, which is I think your suggestion and requirement that we get writing samples and
Yes.
detailed.
Absolutely.
Test is not the right word, but someone that can put together a spreadsheet model and use it effectively would be essential. And I know from private business that assuming that someone can do it because they either have a degree or they had a job before is not,
I agree.
not a good idea. So I'd be glad to work with you on that. You know, we certainly benefited from Sean's capabilities in that department, so.
Oh, that's great. And for the recruitment plan, that is something for the finalists I have found that's very helpful, is to create some sort of writing samples and or assignments that require analytical work depending on the position. And typically I would, work to develop a couple of tools that I would provide to the 2 to 3 finalists in advance of them coming. And because they're pretty extensive, I would send them a form saying that, you need to do this work on your own and you need to sign this statement saying that this work is your own work product and you didn't seek assistance. But again, I think that it's very helpful both for the writing skills as well as the analytical skills to verify that in fact they
Right.
actually have those skills that we're looking
Yep.
for.
Very important.
And then also with the recruitment plan, again, thinking that it would be beneficial to have an inclusive process. Something that I found was critical in helping us make sure that a candidate was not only a good fit for the department, but that they were a good fit for the larger organization and that they were a good fit for the community, was to involve a number of people in that process. And for the first round, what I would plan to do, unless I heard otherwise from you all, is to run what I call an internal and external panel on the same day, and they're going at the same time. And so typically I would facilitate the internal panel. For that, I think it'd be really helpful to have 2 members of the Board of Finance, 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, our school business manager, as well as our deputy town manager, and then to also have an external panel, which I think this is where it'd be fantastic to have Sean facilitate that panel with his experience in HR, but also in actually performing this particular job. And then the external panel, I typically have ask more technical questions that are related to the job. And then the internal panel, I'll typically structure questions more about approach to leadership, approach to supervision, visioning, fit, and again, trying to get at that fit for the organization and fit for the community and our culture. So while they'll certainly ask some technical questions, I'll usually have the external panel focus more on that, and then the internal focus again more on culture, leadership, supervision, those sorts of things. And that would be for the first round. And then for the second round, I like to bring each candidate back for their own day, whether that's a half day or a full day, but meeting with departmental staff, again, having a few more interviews, having an interview with the leadership team, because it's really important for me that we hire somebody who's collaborative and who isn't going to be a silo or an island, but that they integrate well with the full leadership team. So I do think at that particular point, it's very useful to involve the leadership team in an interview as well. But again, sort of taking in all that information, and then ultimately, hopefully I'll come up with a candidate that you all feel comfortable with as well.
Sounds good.
All right, so what action do we need to take tonight? Nothing
I think
formal?
perhaps just consensus or general direction that you're feeling comfortable with the recruitment plan that I plan to use for this particular position.
I think generally, yeah, I think there's definitely a sense of urgency on our part. And you're going to come back, though, with the recommendation on the interim director?
Oh, yes,
Yes, okay.
if we're ready to transition to that, I'd be
Oh,
happy to talk about that.
Jumping around, but I think in terms of the recruitment for the permanent replacement, I think we're all on board with the process. All right?
So, great. Well, we will get that out. We also will put together a glossy marketing profile, which I think will also just help sell the community, where we talk more about the community and community vision, and that's a really terrific marketing piece when we're trying to sell the position. So we'll have that ready to go as well when we post the job ad. But to the interim director point, looking at the timeline that we have, particularly with some of the charter requirements, I don't think it will be possible for us to get a permanent director on board prior to Sean's departure. And so that means perhaps a window of about 4 to 8 weeks, we may need an interim director. And speaking with Sean, because the department does have very limited staffing resources, he suggested that if we can find somebody who has a very strong accounting background, that would be helpful to us in the transition. And so I will definitely put some feelers out. I reached out to a recently retired finance director in Connecticut, who's very well respected and is doing this work. Unfortunately, she's already taken by another community who's recruiting for a director, but she pointed me in the direction of a few other folks who are retired, who are also very competent, who are doing this work. So I'll put some feelers out to see if we can find somebody to come and help us out on an interim basis, just to get us through this transition period. And if I do find a candidate that I think we're comfortable with and feel that they would be a good match, and just again, just to get us through that transition period, that I would bring that recommendation back to you all.
Okay. All right. Good enough?
Good.
All right. Any other questions for Maria on this topic? Great, thank you. All right. Okay, discussion on revised format for annual report. Is that Sean?
Go ahead.
So I asked Melissa to do some research for us on our annual report. I realized that we had not yet started our annual report for the previous fiscal year. And in part, I think you're learning, again, I've only been here for 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, but that, you know, the report was rather cumbersome and voluminous, and that it was a very difficult task to pull together that information. This was actually something that I had also experienced in Mansfield. Our old format of our annual report was very similar to your current, our current version of the annual report here in Simsbury. And there's some really good samples out there, some communities who have transferred to a different format where they're presenting sort of the nuts and bolts, but in a much more concise way. And I think Manchester, Connecticut is a very good sample in terms of a community that's moved to a different format, but still provides the basic information. There is not a charter requirement for the annual report. There is a state statute requirement for the annual report that's very vague in terms of what should be included in that information. And then the only reference we really have here at the town is that my job description for town manager says that I shall, in working with you all, prepare an annual report. So I think we definitely have some latitude in terms of the content and the format. You know, some goals that we would like to accomplish if we do in fact change the format and the content to our annual report is make it a little more user-friendly, make it more concise. I'm hoping, again, that a more brief version that people will actually read it, and also producing a report that's more timely. And if we can, my goal would be, if we make these changes, is that we would be working on collecting this information by August and pulling it together, editing it, and have the document produced no later than the end of the calendar year. Again, just to make the annual report more timely, more relevant, and that by making the information more concise, we're also hoping to save on staff time and design time, which will ultimately save on costs associated with producing the annual report. So those were some of the goals and thoughts that we had, that if in fact we make the changes, that's why we would hope to make those changes. And then Melissa did a great job of pulling together for you the 2 sample documents in terms of the information that we would ask the departments to collect for us. Again, really focusing on the nuts and bolts. You know, how many people they had, what their total budget was for the past fiscal year, accomplishments, key accomplishments for those departments during that time, and that we would really focus on that for the annual report. And then we also included for you just a couple of excerpts from the Manchester model. Again, we thought that was a good sample model for reports. So again, we'd like to make these changes, but before, you know, charging ahead with reformatting the annual report, we just wanted to check in with you all to see if you felt strongly one way or the other in terms of formatting or content for the report.
So is this an issue of actually printing them and distributing them, or is this, I mean, it's really creating, well, if we did this electronically, for instance, it saves some time, but that's not really the main point, but
It's the gathering of information that's incredibly time consuming, the editing of that information, particularly when you start including information from each and every board and committee, particularly with them being volunteer boards and committees. Some don't necessarily meet monthly, and so then when you try to start gathering all of that information from the boards and committees, it just becomes very time consuming, which is then why oftentimes the annual reports get produced so far after the fiscal year has in fact actually ended.
almost meaningless. Yeah. Okay.
If I may, we did actually take out the funds for printing in this current fiscal year, so the next report we produce, which will be for fiscal year 17, will not be printed, it will only be electronic.
Okay, good.
I think it's a great idea to look at this sort of process re-engineering on just about everything we do, given the fiscal times we're in, but also because, people don't read this stuff a lot, and I hate to see, your staff spending a lot of time writing things that relatively few people are going to read. So I would actually err on the side of making it even briefer than what you've proposed, or at least looking at the Manchester sample you gave us where, it describes, well, what does the engineering department do and what does the library do? That's stuff that can just be on the website once and never repeated again in an annual report, because it's not really going to change much from year to year. Just focus on what were the highlights of the last year, good and bad, what were the big accomplishments, what were the big challenges. I think that's probably the most useful. That's just my personal opinion, but that's where I would focus and leave out, the CAFR does a lot on the budget. Obviously, you need to have some summary of that, but, try to avoid repeating stuff that's available elsewhere and just hit the highlights.
I had a question. In terms of the annual report, I did look at the statute and agree with you. It's crazy big. So the question is, can the CAFR be the annual report? And can we just beef that up or, clean that up and just have that be the annual report so that you can reduce one whole production?
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
a
possible.
good
or
idea.
not. But it just seems to me, there's some value in a short document that people will read, but to Linda's point, I'm not sure who's going to read it other than this board.
Well, I'll take the budget slides that, Lisa, you produced that had each department's usage and things, that kind of information presented in standardized format. I see the advantage of having, glossy is not the right word, but a marketing piece on the town. Realtors use them, other, businesses use them, development uses them. I'm with Linda. I think describing what the different departments do should be just something that gets done once and put on the website. But the activity that happens in an annual basis, if you gather it for the budgeting process like you did, that kind of information summarized in a standard format could make a nice annual report. I actually don't think the CAFR should be the annual report, because it really is fascinating reading. But they're two very different audiences for what an annual report is versus the financial report, seems to me.
I would say if we are going to do that and use it as a marketing thing, the one thing I would add is matrix. So, it'd be nice to see, if it's to sell the town, that there are 169 roads, that there are 2,500 things of open space. And really, you only have to do that once, because the roads aren't going
Right.
to change in the open space. So it's just,
Right.
that can go every year, or that we circulate 300,000 books every year, just so people get a
Basic
sense of what we do. Because people don't understand it. And that's just a one and done, because that won't change over time for the most part.
So I think what you're getting back, Maria, is we're on board with something that is more condensed, more usable, and produced in faster time, using electronic format, trying to repeat the format. Once we establish that format, using it year after year, trying to capture sort of key things that would be interesting to somebody who picked it up and wanted to read about it. But what's going on in the town. All right?
Great, that's helpful, thank you. Great, thanks.
Speaking of the CAFR, welcome.
Thank you. You want me up there?
Yeah, if you could. Appreciate it.
So I know you all love reading the CAFR, but I actually did a presentation to kind of summarize what I'm going to talk about.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thanks. This looks a lot like an annual report to me.
To your point, right.
So I have, all the statements with me, the CAFR and the single audits and the management letter. So if you have specific questions on specific pages, I could go to those too. But I thought, just doing this is just a little treetop summary of things, and then we could go into more questions. Sound fine?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, So just the agenda of what I'm going to talk about, just going to talk briefly about the scope and the standards that we followed during our audit. Also with your packet, you received the required auditor's communication from Bloom Shapiro to those charged with governance, which is the Board of Finance. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of that letter. I'll go through the results and financial highlights of the CAFR, the state single audit, the federal single audit, and the management letter, and then just show you the upcoming GASB pronouncements.
I'm sorry, did I miss it, or did you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, Vanessa Rosito, engagement partner for Bloom Shapiro.
Thank you.
Okay, as far as the scope, we actually issue a couple of opinions in the municipal government world. There's opinion units, not just one opinion like in the commercial world. So we issue opinions on governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information. We follow auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and Yellow Book standards. For the federal single audit, we follow uniform guidance promulgated by the federal government, and then the State Single Audit Act with respect to the state single audit. So just to summarize the required auditor's communication, in note 1 to the CAFR, that's where you will find summarize all the significant accounting policies of the town. There was a new GASB statement, Government Accounting Standards Board statement issued that was implemented by the town this year, GASB 74 with respect to OPEB. So I will, show you that in the notes. There's various accounting estimates in your financial statements, so we're required to kind of call those out and kind of take an extra look at them to make sure that they're fair. So as far as the net pension liability and the OPEB obligation, you engaged an actuary to calculate those for you based upon management's assumptions. Also the IBNR, same type of thing. And then management estimates the useful lives of capital assets in order to calculate accumulated depreciation. So we had no difficulties with management or disagreements with management. There's really nothing, to report to you in that vein. Next page, engagement results for the CAFR. Just to delineate the responsibilities of the CAFR, management is responsible for the entire document, if you will. Bloom Shapiro is responsible for the audit opinion, which is really 3 pages in that document. So management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with US GAAP, and also for designing, implementing, and maintaining internal controls to make sure the financial statements are free of material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud. And then we are responsible for expressing opinions on those financial statements and to plan and perform our audit to provide reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are clearly stated. So we've issued clean opinions on all of the opinion units, unmodified opinions.
So Vanessa, just so that on the record, when we say management in the old form of government, that would be, these are signed by whom representing the town? Who's signs off? I know what we do in the public world, so it's the, go ahead.
Finance director.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really the CFO and the CEO of the town.
so the CEO would have been first selectman,
That's
so
right,
in your position for June,
that's right, and now
and
town
the
manager.
CFO would have been, okay, sure.
Right, and
Okay.
that will
All
revert
right,
to the town
thank you.
manager. Right. Okay, so slide 6, just some engagement highlights of, I just called out some of the metrics that you probably look at. So on an entity-wide basis, nothing really changed that much, if you will. Capital assets decreased about $1 million. There were really no large projects going on at the town last year. Debt increased a net of $2.5 million, so you did issue about $11 million of debt. Obviously, you had payments on that debt, and your pension liability did decrease. So I haven't said that much in these audit presentations, so that's a good thing. As far as the general fund, The fund balance of the general fund increased about $753,000. The unassigned fund balance represents 13.4% of general fund expenditures. On a budgetary basis, the general fund revenues were more than budget by $1.07 million, and the expenditures were under budget $20,000, roughly. Tax collections for the current grand list were 99.45%. And then all of the other governmental funds aggregated together, general fund, sewer use, sewer assessment, capital projects, capital non-recurring expenditure, and all the other non-major funds, fund balance increased 5.97. So you had a strong year overall. Your internal service fund, your health insurance fund, dental and health benefits, the net position decreased 1.04 million. So your ending net position was also 1.04 million, so it kind of got cut in half. Probably bad claims year, I would assume.
Yeah, we talked about that at our last meeting.
Topic of a lot of discussion.
Okay. And then the last group of funds on slide 8 is your fiduciary funds. You have 2 trust funds for your pension and your OPEB benefits. So the pension trust fund net position increased 6.3 million, and the OPEB trust fund net position increased 1.4 million. And that's really due to the great market conditions in both of those funds last year. So if you're interested to look at the disclosures, if you have the capital with you, on page 58 is the new disclosure for the OPEB liability. So we always measure the OPEB liability, but it's been on more of a funding basis. So the liability was really based upon, this is how much the actuary is recommending that you fund, and then the town is going to fund X amount. So you have been ahead of the game in the funding calculation. So on page 62, you'll see the old calculation, if you will, which is, this is the amount that is recorded in your financial statements right now. So you actually have an OPEB asset of 5.099 million because you have been funding ahead of schedule, if you will. The new OPEB liability that's going to replace the asset next year is on page 60. So this is really measuring the entire liability for all of the participants, and then taking the net of that liability, so taking the OPEB trust fund position, netting it with that. So your OPEB liability is 6.871 million. So next year, you're gonna go from an asset of 5 million to a liability of roughly 6.8.
Oh, good.
Now, this is not really new information. This amount it's been in the notes to the financial statements in another table.
Geography.
So the rating agencies have always known about this, so it's not a surprise. It's just, the GASB wants to change where this is reported now. Does anybody have any questions?
So I guess the number to really pay attention to, though, is the percentage of total OPEB liability, right?
The funding percentage?
Funding percentage.
So, yeah, so your funding percentage on page 60 below that table is 67.36%. So, again, that's based upon the actuary calculating the liability of 21,053,462, and then your fiduciary net position in your OPEB trust fund 14,182,121. So that net position could be volatile because that's based upon the market value of the assets in your OPEB trust fund. So if we have a great market again this year, knock on wood, the funding percentage will keep going up. But if we don't, it could go down. The market value of the assets used to be smoothed with the old way of calculating the liability, so now there's no more smoothing. It's basically the market value at June 30th.
And last year, we were told we had 20 years left before we were fully funded. Is
Okay.
it safe to say we have 19 years left this
I
year?
don't know that. I mean, that's a better question for your actuary, or
Okay.
Sean, I don't know if you have information.
Yeah, that should
It's
be
always
right.
20 years.
Double check it. I think it's-
Yeah, they
It's
didn't-
always 20 years.
I know, but that's,
Yeah, 20 years again.
it was not updated on page 63. It still talks, it's this, actually, none of this text was updated, so it's still referring to 2016, so just, oh yeah, so it was 21 years left on, it doesn't matter, you can answer that another time. Seems like it's been 20 years forever.
Just your overall opinion about what percentage were funded relative to other towns?
Your rating agencies they're probably a better, people to answer that question. I will tell you that the funding percentage is very high. I do not see this funding percentage very often at my other clients when I do the audit presentation.
Kevin, I'll just add, Rob and I were on the phone with Moody's, and they laughed when they saw it. They didn't believe it was real. They were dumbfounded by how well-funded we'd done.
Okay, on to pension. So that is on page 50. So this is calculated like the new way the OPEB is being calculated. You'll see the total towards the bottom of the page, the table shows the total pension liability by each section, if you will, of the pension trust fund, general government, police, and Board of Education. And then you'll see the planned fiduciary net position of each piece also. So you can see the funding percentage of the three pieces of the pension trust fund.
And this is the same presentation as the previous year?
Yes, it is.
So all they really did was put OPEB into the same format?
Exactly.
Okay.
So OPEB, the GASB really just copied what they did in pension to the OPEB. That's correct. So your total pension liability is 16.7 million, and last year, I'll tell you, it was 20.042 million. So you're going in the right direction. And so I'm gonna go from good news to bad news, maybe. On page 56, I just wanted to call your attention to the teacher's pension liability. So I was at Connecticut Council of Small Towns, as was Sean and Maria and Melissa. So we heard the senators talking about the potential of bringing this liability back to the municipality. I know it was talked about a lot a year ago. It's kind of not been talked about now, but I think from what they said anyway, the topic is probably going to come up again. So what this shows on page 56 is what the teachers' pension liability is for the teachers in the town of Simsbury. So this is how much the state is responsible for now, 117.5 million. So, whatever percentage they feel like gifting to the towns, what a big, huge amount is.
So if I read this correctly, the 12,820,000 that was an expense and a revenue item was the amount that was taken out of the teacher's payroll and then contributed to the pension liability that the state had no impact on our operating expense.
Yeah, what this actually is the amount that the state has contributed on their behalf.
The state contributed on their behalf?
Yes, and the teachers in addition contribute.
So we had an income from the state and an expense to the state for the liabilities that the state has.
That's right.
Yeah. And on the state's balance sheet, how much of the 117 million for us would be funded?
I will show you that. That is on page
20%?
minus 12,
Exactly.
because they have geo bonds on pension stuff.
So that is on page 67.
667?
Yep, 67. So this is intended to be a 10-year presentation of this liability. It's only been required to be disclosed since 2015. So you could see from 15, it was 85, 16, it went to 93, and now it's at 117.5, and it is 52.26% funded.
I'm sorry, 52.26?
Yeah. It's
Trending
going
in the
down.
wrong direction.
Yeah, down from 61%.
That's higher than I thought it would have been. All right, thank you.
Yes, in here.
Watch out.
They did change their rate of return though, right? State,
They
they had
did.
8.5, it's now 6.9?
99.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like a year in arrears, that's the way they do it.
So it's actually gonna go down then if they change the assumption rate, right? The percent funded.
If the investment rate of return is going down, the liability is gonna go up,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Right.
a lot.
So percent funded will be more like in the 30s.
It, I don't know, but
Okay.
it's not gonna be.
That's more what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the CAFR before I go to the single audits and the management letter? Okay, so just real quick, federal single audits, obviously you receive federal grants, we are required to perform a federal single audit on those grants. Using the guidance provided by the federal government, we have to select a program or programs to test. We selected the special education cluster this year, and we issued a clean opinion on compliance over that program. And if the town had material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, either in this program, in a single audit, in their financial systems, at the Board of Ed, wherever, it would be reported in the federal single audit and the state single audit. We did not, we report any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Okay. And then similar, state single audit, we tested town aid road and open choice, and also issued a clean or unmodified opinion over compliance. And again, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. As far as the management letter, there was one new recommendation this year, and then the rest are, I just put like an update of the progress. So the new recommendation this year is we're recommending that the town record the pension and OPEB trust fund activity on the general ledger. Right now, the town does an Excel spreadsheet both for the actuary and for us to put it into the CAFA report, but we're recommending that, at least on a quarterly basis, the activity, the contributions, investment activity be recorded in the general ledger.
That makes sense.
Capital asset reporting, this has been a comment for a couple of years. I think really tried this year and thought we got there with this, but there was kind of a glitch with the third-party provider that was hired by the town, and the data that they gave the town was inconsistent. So we just made an executive decision to just do things like we've been doing the past couple of years. And also, I think, along with that, the capital asset policy needed to be finalized as far as the capitalization thresholds for the fixed assets. So I think that, in conjunction with just kind of getting the third-party provider up to speed, hopefully next year will be okay.
Same provider we're using?
Yeah, we have a new provider, the same one that the Board of Ed has used for a number of years. And as Vanessa was saying, one of the things we discovered through this process, though, is also we need to update and make sure, I would like at the next meeting to bring back the capital asset policy, because there were a few pieces of that were inconsistent, and I just want to, it's a good time to refresh. And again, they base their analysis on our policy, so they need to what we were doing in practice was a little different from what that policy said, and also just need an official approval of that policy on the record too. So we can talk more about that at the next meeting, but I'd like to get that
Okay.
wrapped up this year before.
The next one has to do with internal controls. There's a couple items that there just needs to be a little bit more segregation of duties, which is hard when there aren't, the number of employees that you need in the finance department. And also, the other item with the review, proper reviews not being performed. Again, it's just because there aren't enough people to do it. Fraud risk assessment. I think Sean mentioned to me that there's funding in the budget for that, both for the town and Board of Education. And then the second to last item is the accounting procedures manual. Again, I should have stated that these are suggestions for improvements to internal controls. This is our wish list for you. In a perfect world, we would like you to have this. So we would like all of our clients to have an accounting procedures manual. It doesn't happen that often, but that's the best case scenario. So when you have changes in employment, there's written policies and procedures that somebody could follow and pick up. And then the last item is the positive pay system, which I know is a thorn in everybody's side at this point. I think, it's still there. Hopefully.
What is positive pay?
So, positive pay basically sends information in advance to the bank to make sure that those cashed in the check are the same as those that were issued the check. I think very simply. Simsbury Bank, originally when this was recommended, I believe back in 2011, so about 7 years ago, Simsbury Bank didn't have the feature at the time. My understanding is they do have it, but it has not been compatible with our current finance and payroll system. And so we're still working through, I think it is possible, but it's just, again, it is an allocation of staff resources and it hasn't been a high priority. But this can, and more as you know, some of these, you've seen kids can deposit their paychecks with their cell phones now. A lot of our folks that work Simsbury Farms and seasonal will do that, for instance, and they may forget they've already deposited. Things like that, should be caught through the system, but something like positive pay would really prevent that from being cashed twice and then having to be reverted out.
So we're still sending paper checks, not just doing direct deposit?
Most employees are on direct deposit, but people have the option of accepting paper checks.
Yeah, and this prevents the checks from being altered once they go out too, because the town is going to tell the bank this has to be payable to ABC vendor for $3,000. And so if somebody alters it and puts a 1 in front of the 3, they won't honor the check.
Right.
All right. On slide 13 is the ever-growing list of new GASB standards in the next couple of years. Like I said, the second part of OPEB is going to affect GASB 75 next year. Perhaps some small parts of GASB 85, the omnibus, which is kind of a catch-all to correct some errors or misconceptions in previous GASB statements. So that might also affect you next year, and then we will look at years after that as they come
I like this term pronouncements. It has this sort of
out.
royal, we pronounce that.
And then last but not least, Bloom Shapiro is having an elected officials forum about operational efficiency. So I have flyers for all of you. It's on March 20th. It's free. We're inviting, elected officials around the Hartford area. We're also having one in Fairfield County too for folks over there. So we'd love to have you.
Opinion on efficiencies? I know Rutgers has been doing a lot of studies on that in terms of what's the optimal size of a town to get those the records sort of said if you're 25,000 to 250, that's the optimal size. You're under 25, there's opportunities. You're over 250, you would run into bureaucracy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know if I have any thoughts on that. Obviously, I think it's a good idea to be efficient. We try to be efficient at Bloom Shapiro too. It's hard, I think, in Connecticut with, the towns are so old and they've been doing things the same way for such a long time, and it's a trust issue. You have to trust that things are gonna be done right by the other side, and it's a control issue. So if you can get over those two hurdles, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, but records sort of laid out that it's easy to say it's a great idea, but when you actually look at the cost savings, they aren't that great if you're between 200 and 25 in that sweet spot, except in infrastructure.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not just a cost saving, but it's just having a backup. It's just having someone else able to perform your job function should something happen. So I think it creates efficiencies there. A lot of times it's not a cost saving endeavor.
More like mutual aid assistance
Exactly.
in terms of that.
Yeah. That is all I have.
Right?
Questions?
Questions for Vanessa?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, update and discussion on governor's proposed fiscal year 19 budget. Anything important here?
And I just pulled together, it's a little premature, I know we haven't presented the budgets through the Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance yet, but there's been a lot of, talk in the news, and just wanted to kind of have a placeholder in the agenda to talk about this a little bit. I did pull together a brief memo, it wasn't in the original packet, but you should have it with you there. Just on two different fronts, really, you've probably heard, I know we talked about it a little bit, not a lot has changed since November, but the governor did, hold back $531,000 from what we were set to get in fiscal 18 as part of the adopted state budget from October. While that hasn't changed, we do still have both this elderly circuit breaker program not being funded, at least the reimbursement for us of about $70,000, and also just really coming into some certainty now in the last week or so that the second half of Town Aid Road is almost certainly not going to be funded. You probably read that in the paper. We get about $360,000 a year. They've already made the first payment, and the second one is usually around now or next month. But unless they solve the pretty much insolvent the state transportation fund, there's no way we're going to. Almost certainly we will not receive that second payment, so we're accounting for that.
So how much are we expecting?
And that's not a general fund hit, just for what it's worth. You may recall we have, as actually as Mr. just referencing, Town Aid Road is a separate special revenue fund here in Simsbury. It has a decent fund balance, but we have, counted on that for equipment purchases in DPW. But it's about $181,000 that we would not receive. So that's equipment that either needs to be deferred or something else that doesn't get purchased in the next couple of years.
So that's on top of the 531 and the elderly
the
circuit breaker.
Right, in addition to, right, exactly.
And circuit breaker is on top of that as
The
well.
circuit breaker is on top of that, right, so we're adjusting our revenue assumptions for the circuit breaker piece.
So it's more like 800,000.
Yeah, if the except for the fact that the 181 is a general fund,
Right.
We've spent so long the last 6 or 9 months talking about what we adopted and how that's gonna mesh with the eventual state budget, that it's sort of a little ancillary to that, but it's real dollars and it's real things we can't purchase, so it's significant. In the end though, we're still projecting just on the budget to budget basis, about a $1.5 million year-end surplus, just in terms of what we adopted versus what it looks like the state will give us this year. That could change, throughout the year. There could be more holdbacks. We've only received the one ECS payment so far. The biggest one is the one that comes right around now, so we're waiting to see that come through. I'll be happy when it does, but otherwise, the rest, that's the bulk of our state aid, obviously, through ECS anyway. Related, the governor on February 7th released his proposed fiscal 19 budget. You'll recall this is the second year of the biennium, so we already had numbers. We were putting numbers up in the mill rate worksheet. the governor basically, just to simply sum it up, would make permanent those holdbacks that we just received, and also cut an additional $201,000 in addition from what we're going to be getting this year. So to translate that to what we've been talking about, that's about a 12% reduction from the second year of the biennium that we've been putting up there on the slide. So we had assumed a 20% reduction. I certainly don't want to say it's good news, but it's less bad than we may have been projecting, at least while we've been doing the mill rate worksheet. But again, it's just the governor's proposed budget. You know, I know it feels like we were just having all these conversations, but there's some talk about that being the worst it could be. There's some towns that are planning for that to be the worst. We were not hit as hard as some towns because pilot was all but eliminated. Towns like Farmington, you may have noticed, just got slammed. And so we are not heavily reliant on pilot at all. We don't have a lot of state property. So it's not a major issue for us in that respect. But so cautiously optimistic as we're planning. Obviously, we'll talk a lot more about this in the next month when we present the budget. The only other sort of interesting thing you may hear about that I don't think is going to really go anywhere, I added a note at the end, a proposal to allow taxpayers to reclassify their property tax payments as charitable donations. Anyone else read about this?
Yes.
It's an effort to counter, the recent tax change.
Looking at
I admire the creativity, I'll say that. My take briefly is, and I've seen an analysis saying basically, as you do with any charitable donation, you can't take credit for that you will be receiving a benefit from. So my personal opinion is, although that would be, I suppose, great, although mechanically it could be complicated, it's really hard to see that the IRS being okay with that. But anyway, you may hear more about that. The governor's proposing it, and he's going to give us more information on it. It's going to be one big charity.
Still looking for a job in DC.
Couple of questions. Did we receive any payments of property tax by people who thought they'd be able to deduct it and have to deal with that?
Yes, absolutely. So we have, if I can pull it quick enough. In the month of
We could
December-
take those as charitable deductions.
Right, right. Well, we did just have what I think was the largest tax refunds ever. Over 500,000, which is, for those that have been on the Board of Selectmen, we never see numbers that high. At our last Board of Selectmen meeting, for that very reason, folks that paid knowing their bank was going to pay anyway, but wanted to make sure they paid before December 31st. So we had a higher than usual, I actually thought it was going to be even higher amount of refunds, but about $550,000. But yeah, off the top of my head, I believe our normal December, we collect about $8 million. We collected it north of $14 million this December. So a lot of people had, some smart accountants and knew that they should at least get that first payment in. It was the folks that either they were turned away for trying to pay future year tax liability, or the refunds were really mostly driven by CoreLogic, the processing company, paying in addition to folks writing a personal check. So.
And then a separate question, different topic, how the level of appeals based on the revaluation, is that as expected, higher, lower?
I think it's trending as expected, maybe a little better than expected, but I can certainly circle back and send information out when I talk.
So again, we just very early, but we had used a rate of the ultimate impact of the revaluation. Still expect those numbers to be?
Yeah, I think they're still pretty good, and I'll double check with David. I know we had one fairly large property that was considering it, but again, it's working through the process. But I think all indications are even, the dollars that we were apart is not as significant as I thought it might be. So we'll see how that goes.
I know we had a few questions last month for David that he was going to get back to us on. Is he going to do that in writing?
Sure, yeah, let me follow up with him on that as well when I talk to him tomorrow and send something back out to you guys for sure.
We'd ask for some detail of residential versus commercial.
Yeah,
or,
and some breakout
whole
on-
New versus adjustment to
Just
existing
send that
stock.
to us, because Maria had asked the exact same question when she started. And so actually I do have it, let me read through it and make sure it's.
You'll probably get an answer.
And I think it's hitting almost all of the ones that you asked as well, so I think we'll forward that on when I vet through it a little bit. But it does break out sort of apartments and different levels and the bands that we were talking about.
Residential, commercial breakdown, top 10 taxpayers, some of that
Right.
basic information.
Yeah, and some of it was, he gave us a flat, revaluation went up, whatever it was, 5%, but very different on the $1 million
The
house
different
than the
pieces,
Yeah, we're looking for
$200,000
bands
house.
of property values, so I'm not sure it's in that last email, but I know it's something he was gonna try to see if he could pull together.
Yeah, and
or
how
at least
much-
a sample of it.
How much of the revow
Right.
led to the grand list growth versus new development.
Right.
That we do
Yeah,
have.
that was
That,
another
that I
question.
think he was gonna get us. The
Yeah.
stratification by real estate prices, I doubt he was.
No, I think
he
he
was
said
pretty.
he was gonna do it.
Well,
You heard with your optimistic ear. I heard sort of, that would not be hard to do. But we'll see. I'd love to see it, but we'll see. I'm not letting him off the hook. I want to see if we can get
It's
it.
gotta be
I
a
have-
sort on an South Street,
Yeah.
you know?
Let's see if I have it right here. I think I do have that piece. Let's see if it's, my internet connects.
All right, other topics? So, we're fresh, we're right on the cusp now of the budget season, so when do we start to see things, and can we just go over the timeline? Should have
Sure.
this
Yeah, so I
in
can.
my head, but,
And can we go through the dates of,
yes, that's what if we
Yeah,
can.
let's do both of those things. Just to answer your other question real quick, the estimated grand list growth, without revaluation, 1.25%.
So that's from new stock.
From all new stock, right, exactly.
Okay.
About
1 point
28
what?
1.25% or $28.5 million of value, assessed value. So 1.25%. So that would be, I mean, in any other year, for us, it's a pretty good year.
Yeah.
We certainly had flat years. We've had, I remember there was a 0.6, I think, a couple years ago. So healthy as it is, but yeah, obviously not taking account of the whole 6%. Let me pull up the calendar. The town manager will be presenting her budget to the Board of Selectmen on Monday, February 26th, right around the corner. They'll be having their first budget workshop on Saturday, March 10th, and followed by adoption. Again, it's up to them, but could either be as early as that Monday, the 12th. They have another budget workshop on Thursday, the 15th of March. And that is when the Board of Selectmen on, hang on, let me pull it up here. Oh, I should give you the Board of Education dates too. So hold on one second. Pull it up.
We haven't changed any of the dates, right, from the
No,
schedule?
the Board of Finance dates have all stayed as proposed as
I just
regular
wanted
meetings.
to be
I
careful.
just want to
But
read,
The,
sure I have them.
Say the 13th of March?
the 13th, right, so Tuesday, March 13th is the Board of Ed presents to the Board of Finance. By charter, that has to be by the 15th, so that's Tuesday, the 13th. And then the plan is for the Board of Selectmen's budget to be presented to the Board of Finance on Tuesday, March 20th. Again, assuming they've adopted it. They have to give that to you by the end of March, so this is a little earlier than, theoretically, it could get bumped by a week, but we're hoping to stay on that schedule. And that should be possible.
So
and
we have a
otherwise,
meeting on the
board-
13th and the 20th?
That's correct.
Yeah, the 13th isn't on my calendar, so, yeah,
Mine
so.
wasn't on mine either.
Yeah, so let's, do we do invites, or how do we do this? I mean, let's. Yeah,
Here's a
so,
piece of paper, I mean.
yeah, all right, so,
I can do
5:45,
invites.
5:45 here,
That's correct.
on the 13th.
March 13th is the Board of Education.
Sean, maybe you can just resend that thing
I'll
you
send the
sent us
budget calendar
before.
out, sure.
the
And I can
calendar.
do calendar invites, I think,
No, don't, we don't have to
Tuesday?
start doing that, just, I'll put it on.
For those of us who still use paper calendars,
Say
that's
what?
useless.
Come on now.
But it is on my calendar, so see, old technology works.
Yeah.
so then the other important date after that and is to forward the budget on for public hearing, the first of which needs to be on Thursday, April 5th, as we have in our regular meeting calendar for the year.
So that's is that a Board of Finance meeting?
That's the one that's usually hosted up in the auditorium at the high school.
That is the public
It's
hearing.
in the
Amphitheater,
theater
sorry,
typically, yeah.
amphitheater.
Yeah.
I confuse the amphitheater and the auditorium all
Yeah.
the time.
April 5th, April 5th.
The smaller one.
Yes.
That is Thursday, April 5th.
At what time?
At a time to be determined. I think we
Six,
published
I think you
at 6
typically-
o'clock in our
What's that,
our regular
6?
meeting calendar says 6 o'clock.
At the high school?
Yeah, so.
Amphitheater.
And I'll print out I can print this right now, actually, and have some copies for folks, but. That's what it is. April 5th, 6 PM, high school amphitheater budget hearing. Typically with a regular meeting to follow is how we've always filed. So I'm gonna print this to the big copier right now, just get extra copies.
So March 13th, March 20th, April 5th.
Those are the dates so far.
That's it.
Yeah. And that's when it starts to get, so on our regular meeting calendar, we have a second public hearing tentatively for Tuesday, April 24th. Technically by charter, you only have to have one, but you may recall this is where we have to have a second if we want to push the referendum into May, which has been tradition. So right now, if we have a hearing on the 24th, then the scheduled referendum would be Tuesday, May 15th. And that's where we have the meeting to set the mill rate after Henry James.
Our stated goal this year is to stay on track to do it without postponement.
Did it work? Oh, nice. Here's another copy of my calendar.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. That's-
Thank you.
So the 24th is only if needed, right? April 24th?
It's only if needed and if you want to have the referendum in May. There's nothing that says you couldn't have the referendum the last week of April. In the past, we've always either been looking for more information, so we've been more of a tendency to delay things. And I think really it's just been more of a tradition that, except for the years that we've done the June referendum, it's always been a first or second week of May.
So I haven't done it when we've stayed on this, the last 2 years, we've postponed and done it. So if we stayed on this schedule without continuing the public hearing,
Yep.
at the meeting following the public hearing, the Board of Finance would act to refer the budgets to the referendum and set the date, and that date would be what?
So, right.
That would be
charter
the May
says-
15th?
Yeah, so what actually happens is the charter says, all right, let's say theoretically you have the hearing, and if you were to adopt, it's whenever you adopt the budget, so you have to adopt it within 10 days of the hearing, whatever the last hearing is. So if it's the first hearing, it's also the last hearing, right? So if there's only one hearing. So it would need to be within 10 days of Thursday, April 5th. So let's say, it wouldn't be Sunday the 15th, but if you held a Board of Finance special meeting to adopt the budget on Thursday, April 12th, say, then what happens is you direct me to file the budget, and then the referendum is triggered 14 to 21 days from whenever I file it with the town clerk.
Okay. So it would be irregular for us to have the public hearing where we have audience at the amphitheater, close the public hearing, have our regularly scheduled meeting after that, right in the amphitheater, and adopt the budgets and recommend them to referendum. Is that possible?
That's definitely possible.
Okay.
We've done
And
that.
that's happened.
Yeah.
That's definitely happened before.
Ira, long ago. right?
Long ago,
Yeah, back when, right,
back in the
yeah.
good old
Yeah.
days.
The smoother days, maybe.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, yeah, certainly in a
So
time
the
of
alternative, though, would be a special meeting of the Board of Finance some time after April 5th, where
That's
we
right.
would do the same thing we would have otherwise done at the meeting
Right.
at the amphitheater.
Just pushed out.
Recommend it. And then that sets up the time frame for the referendum
Correct.
within that band of 14 to 21 days. And whatever
we've
day
typ-
that is, then we have our meeting at the cafeteria after the election's over and set the mill rate, accept the approval of the town of the budgets, and off we go.
That's right. So in that case, and then it's, again, just been tradition, there's nothing that says it has to be a Tuesday, but we've typically chosen the Tuesday between the 14 and 21 days. And so
Right.
that could be either Tuesday, April 24th is the referendum, or I believe if I wait a few days to file it, I could trigger Tuesday, May 1st. I have to double check the calendar.
Yeah.
But we could coordinate schedules first to make sure people are available and then back into
All right.
referendum day.
Okay? Good.
I have a quick question on the CAFR.
Okay.
Who actually writes the text part of it? Is it Bloom Shapiro that does it, or is it our staff?
So it's a little of both. Some of it does carry forward from year to year. I write the management discussion and analysis section at the beginning, which is about the first 13 or so pages. Other pieces are sort of, they maintain the text and then they ask for updates or has anything changed. But that's, yeah, theoretically, it could all be revised and edited. The financials themselves are up to, Bloom blesses, and we can't edit, obviously.
Just would make a note to you, since you'll still be here next year, Maria, that there are some things in here that I had actually pointed out last year that needed to be updated, and they're still not updated, and, but I would hope that you take a look at it with the same eagle eye that you looked at the annual report and see, do we actually need this much verbiage, or can we make life easier for your staff by reducing some of the workload? I mean, particularly since it seems to be exactly the same verbiage year after year, why are we paying for printing? So, for next year, note to self.
I hope in some life you get to work for a public company, Linda.
I have
Have you?
multiple times.
Okay, all right.
I'm a perfectionist, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all right.
That's all I have on
Okay,
budget.
great.
Did you get the award this year?
We've applied for the award, right, so we usually will find out in.
Which
I won't be
award's
here to
that?
accept, they usually will receive it in June.
Oh,
We applied on time this year. This will be I believe this will be would be our 20th year receiving the CAFR award.
So I do want to just recognize Sean, because this is a tremendous amount of
It
work.
is.
I mean,
It
it's
is,
just
yeah.
hours and
Yeah.
hours and hours of work.
Yeah.
So thank you for your efforts on that.
Appreciate it, thank you.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Move to adjourn?
And a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We just go through these management discussions and it just goes like.